I think the Russian intelligence enterprise was skewed as well to only telling Putin what he wanted to hear and perhaps not being as objective as they should have been and not being as professional. And trust me, as having someone who was in the trenches of the U.S. intelligence community post 9/11, we made a lot of mistakes too. So I'm not saying that the U.S. is perfect, but I think the Russian institutions themselves operate much more politically than we have here in the United States, and that is part and parcel of it. So yeah, I mean, Putin has made a strategic blunder, and the analogy I have been using is the car is clearly, if you think about Russia as a country, the car is, he's driven the car into the ditch. I'm not sure how you back it out without doing even more damage, but I also think there's a potential where Putin, because again, he is blinded to any sort of outside perspective, whether it's coming from the intelligence professionals in Russia or not, that they're getting closer to driving the country off the cliff. And if that happens, it will take decades for Russia to recover. I already think Russia, you could consider it a pariah state, at least at an international level. The losses on the battlefield are just beyond belief. Nobody knows how many Russian soldiers have died or been injured, but conservative estimates, it's probably between 200 to 300,000 soldiers in not even 2 years of fighting. No modern country can withstand these kind of losses. And how far is Putin willing to go to continue that approach that is just not leading to the results that he probably wanted? So diplomatically, things aren't going well. On the battlefield, they're not going well, even if things are more kind of frozen from a defensive perspective. Economically, Russia continues to suffer. The ruble is devaluing, even though Russia is also being a bit skillful in terms of its ability to still get its oil and gas products to market and engage in trade with other countries that are willing to look the other way or not worry about sanctions from the West. And I would have to believe that there is growing domestic discontent in Russia as well, because again, the battlefield losses alone are horrific. And just like in Afghanistan 30 plus years ago, it was the families of the fallen that eventually put pressure on the similarly kind of sclerotic Kremlin, who was kind of tone deaf to what was going on, to say enough is enough. Like, we've lost 10,000 of our young men in this far off battle in Afghanistan. At what point will Russian domestic sentiment also turn the tide against Putin? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But again, I just can't believe that another 200 to 300,000 Russian troops have to get killed or wounded before the Russian population itself kind of, I'm not saying they're going to rise up and throw Putin out of power, but again, there have to be more pressure on him. So I think at every angle of how you look at this, that Putin has lost and has miscalculated. And now it's just a question of, based on events on the battlefield, at what point will there be some opening for either a ceasefire or some kind of negotiated settlement between Ukraine and Russia? And Ukraine is suffering too. I mean, I don't think Ukraine can continue these battlefield losses either. And their country is, well, 1/10 the size in terms of population. So the war seems unsustainable for both sides. And eventually there's going to have to be an end to this. I don't think it can go on for years and years and years. But yeah, backing up to my original point, absolute miscalculation by Putin. And now I think it's up to him to figure out, how does he not drive the car completely off the cliff?
Just a last question. You might have heard about the Prigozhin crash theory. So do you think it feels like it's out of a movie plot, probably like a Christopher Nolan movie plot, but then do you think it's some sort of a cover-up so that international agencies do not go for Prigozhin, or is he actually dead? Like, what's your take on this?
I would make the assessment without obviously having been inside of Russia when it happened, but Prigozhin is dead, and that Prigozhin was on borrowed time for several months anyways. I mean, his attitude towards the Russian military was becoming more and more bellicose. He's crossing all these lines and these personal attacks. The attempted mutiny was another one of these red lines that, in Putin's eyes, nobody is allowed to get away with in Putin's Russia, and we've seen Putin silence other people who were far less threatening to him than Evgeny Prigozhin. So I don't think any of us were surprised of what happened with Prigozhin and the incident. I don't think there's a cover up. I do think he was silenced because he was viewed as a direct threat to Putin. And again, he had angered so many people at the top of the Russian security establishment.